Today we're going to visit the John Elliot Classics Museum here on the Sandy Bay campus, where Jane is going to give us a short presentation about what we can learn from Roman coins. So, come along.
Welcome to the Classics Museum. So today we'll be looking at Roman coins, and I just have some basic info about coins to share with you before that. So coins are interesting to us as historians for a lot of different reasons, because they can be approached from different perspectives. You can look at coins from an art historical perspective, because they're basically tiny pieces of art that people would have seen on a regular basis. And we can study them in terms of art history, because we can see how the technology changes for producing the dyes that press the images in. So art historians might find coins very interesting for their work. They're also useful for political history, so coins can tell us about emperors, how they wanted to be perceived, how their portraiture changes over time. We can also see what events were worthy of commemoration on coins. We can see how emperors' titles change over time. And we can often corroborate the evidence we find on coins with written sources as well. And I think that in class we've mostly looked at coins as sources for political history, because we've been looking at how coins portray a certain message to the emperor's subjects. The third perspective is an economic one. So what were people spending their money on? What cities were connected by trade? When we find a coin hoard, it tells us about where Roman coins were traveling and what places were connected. So we get art history, political history, economic history, all from coins. So that's why they're really cool. There are two schools of thought that are quite extreme on how to interpret coins. One of them is a purely economic perspective, wherein coins and the images on them are incidental to their purpose as pieces of currency. So that school of thought would say that most people in the Roman Empire wouldn't have taken notice of the images on coins, that the emperors may have not had as much influence over the production of images than we think. So that's one extreme, just to look at coins as pieces of currency for their economic purpose. And then the other way of interpreting coins as propaganda. So the emperor himself would pay a lot of attention and effort into constructing his image on the coin, and people in the empire would have thought a lot about what those images meant. But the reality is probably somewhere in the middle. And if you think about coins in your own life, how often do you actually look at the image and contemplate its symbolic significance? So how often do you guys think about the images on your Australian coins? Often? Never? Every year when they get updated? Yeah, so when a new coin comes out, people may have noticed more. So at the beginning of a new emperor's reign, people may have noticed, oh, Vespasian has these coins coming out, and they would have taken more note of it. So I do think that the reality is somewhere in the middle in terms of an economic and a propagandistic perspective. When I move to a new country, I actually look at the coins a lot, because I've lived in Canada and Australia and the US, and I just got back from Europe. So last night I was looking at all the coins and thinking about the symbolism. And one of my Australian dollars had a picture of a guy holding up a hat, and it was commemorating World War II ending and said something about peace. And I immediately thought of all the Roman coins that have pox on them as the goddess of peace. And I think that symbolism would have had a lot of relevance for the person minting it, but then in terms of your everyday person, they might not notice that, or they wouldn't notice it unless it were a commemorative coin or a special coin that looked different than all of the rest. So I think that in reality, the impact of the images on the coins would have varied depending on who you ask in society. Some people may never notice, other people might notice all the time. I also would like to share with you some terminology of coins. So the front side with the face on it is called the obverse, and the back side is the reverse. So in Australian coinage, the head is actually on the back side, so you have to kind of flip that around in your mind to understand this terminology. So Yeah, this is just important because when you look at coins in exhibits, you'll see O and R, and this means obverse and reverse. And technically, obverse is the front side with usually a portrait on it in terms of imperial coins, and the reverse will have some other image. So this one I'm holding has Vespasian's head on the front, on the obverse, and mourning Jewish people on the back, on the reverse. The type of the coin is the type of image on the coin. So you might have a laureate bust of an emperor, and that would be a type. You could have the Pax Goddess type. So the type is how we talk about the main image on the coin. The legend is the written part, so the emperor's name and his titles. In the later empire, we start seeing mint marks, so when bureaucracy got more complex, and after the economic crisis of the 3rd century, it was really important for coins to show where they came from so that you'd know it was a valid coin that was the correct weight of silver. So that became more of an issue later on. The field is just the background, the part that doesn't have any imagery on it. So these are some terms you might find useful. So obverse, reverse, legend, type, and field. In terms of dating coins, there are a few different ways that we can approach the date. Obviously, if we have a coin of Vespasian, we know from other sources when he ruled, so we can date it to his reign roughly. The titles that emperors have changes over time, so they might adopt titles later in their reign. Events, so this one shows the capture of Judea, so we can date that event with other sources as well. So those are some ways of dating coins, but also the portraiture on the coin may evolve during the emperor's reign, and I have an example of Nero. Nero's reign was 54 to 68. So he starts out looking like this and ends up looking like this. So we can kind of look at Nero's portraits and figure out kind of where in his reign it comes from. But Nero seems to be an emperor who is actually very invested in the way that his coins communicated certain elements of his reign. We hear in Suetonius about Nero paying a lot of attention and actually asking for certain things to be commemorated. But in terms of other emperors, sometimes we don't know if the emperor himself chose the image or if it was just approved by him. Sometimes out in the provinces, they could issue coins without actually talking to the emperor about it, and they might just be trying to portray the emperor in a way that was significant to their context. Quickly, in terms of how they were made, you would pour molten metal into a mold that would create blanks that were little circles, and then the blanks would be put upon a die that was placed on an anvil that had one of the sides on it. You put another die on top. These two dies have the obverse and reverse images on them, and then you hit it with a hammer and you have a coin. Romans developed better coin-making technology over time, but originally it was very rudimentary like that. And with that, I think we should start looking at our selection. So the coins that we have today are actually ones that I've shown you on slides in class. So we have the crocodile one with Agrippa and the Battle of Actium. We have Vespasian and the mourning Jewish people in Judea. We have a couple Nero coins, so it's all pretty awesome, I think.